All right. So, if you guys have been waiting for us for a minute, can you please say hello in the comments in the chat screen? I'm used to saying chat because I've been watching a lot of Twitch lately. Been watching a lot of live streams, which I remember used to be a thing in the Web 1.0 days as well. Like just watching people about their lives. It's so odd. But anyway, folks, say hello to me and Allison in the comments, please. If you're here, we'd like to say hello back. Hey everyone, I am Lindy Johnson. I am the content director of communities for AdMonsters and AdExchanger, and I'm here with the one and only Allison Schiff, who is the managing editor of AdExchanger. She has been chronicling the DOJ versus Google saga from the very start. If it happened in that courtroom or in fine print or web print, Allison caught it. Last week, as you all know, a federal judge officially ruled that Google monopolized the publisher ad server and ad exchange markets. But we're not here to rehash those headlines. We are here to unpack what this means for the ad ecosystem and what might actually change. So let's start where it all landed. Allison, what stood out most for you in the judge's ruling?
First, I just want to say hello from Washington, D.C. I'm sitting on the floor of the Walter Washington Conference Center where the IAPP event is wrapping up. So apologies if you hear any ambient noise. If I'm being honest, my first thought when I heard the verdict was like, oh shit, because I was supposed to be on vacation that day, but I clocked in that morning to write a story. And I don't find it surprising that Judge Brinkema ruled this way. I wasn't sure exactly how it was going to shake out, but when people would ask me in the months prior to the verdict what I thought the outcome of the case would be, my answer always was, I think the government is going to win like at least a couple of counts, but not the entire case. I just wasn't sure exactly which counts. And I was in the courtroom in Virginia, but only for the first week. So I didn't catch everything, although I did avidly read about it for the rest of the trial. But for the first week of testimony, even in that brief time, I just had the feeling that the DOJ was presenting a strong case. And when I went back to Virginia in November, right before Thanksgiving, to hear closing arguments, the judge was playing her cards pretty close to the vest. But there was also the sense that I picked up on, it wasn't just me, I think others did too, that she was leaning, in a certain direction. But she didn't give away too much. She's very chill, Judge Lynne Brinkema.
Okay, first of all, I have to say kudos to you or thank you for joining us from on the floor.
Sorry for this awkward angle. I'm holding the podcast mic.
It's great though. Happy you could be here with us. Thank you for that initial reaction. I know for us, from the Ad Monsters side, we talk to publishers all the time. This ruling didn't feel like a revelation. It was more of a confirmation. Publishers always felt like they weren't working with Google because they loved the tech. They stayed there because there was nowhere else to go. And is that what you've heard out there from publishers that you talk to? Because I know you spoke to some publishers as well as other folks in the ad tech ecosystem. Do you feel that is what most publishers felt like this was the only game in town?
I mean, for sure, and that's really the heart of the government's case. I mean, it's been Google's argument in its own defense that publishers choose Google because it's the best, but the court's decision is clear. Google was found guilty of maintaining a monopoly over the publisher ad server market and the ad exchange market. And it was also found guilty, we didn't mention this, of tying DFP with AdX. I mean, regardless of this ruling, Google is still going to argue that publishers chose Google and will continue to choose Google because it has the best stuff, but the court doesn't see it that way. And the reason why this case even happened is because publishers did not and still don't, I think, feel that way, although they feel like they have to use these tools. That is the case. That
Right.
was the case.
That was the case, is the case until whatever happens. I'm glad you mentioned Tide because I am remembering the diagram, the ad tech spaghetti.
Spaghetti
What
ball.
spaghetti to football?
Yes.
Yeah. What was the reaction to that when that diagram, you
So
know?
I don't remember seeing it during the first week, or maybe I blocked it out because it was so complex and crazy looking. But I think the reaction was, what the heck is this monstrosity? And how can anyone ever understand this kind of thing? And it became kind of a meme because it was just emblematic of the complexity of ad tech.
Right, for sure. What's the vibe overall now? Like, are people, I think I saw some people saying, oh my God, we wasted 5 years to first of all, journalists having to write all these headlines, people testing privacy sandbox, publishers and buyers, everybody testing privacy sandbox. Well, not everybody, but a few people. Just what is the vibe? What is the feeling out there right now?
You bring up the other major Google news that broke. So last Thursday, just a week ago, we got the verdict in the Google ad tech case. And then on Tuesday, I was at another privacy event, the IAB's Public Policy and Legal Summit. And at noon, Google put out a blog post that they're not going to release the opt in mechanism for third party cookies that they were planning to roll out. And the reaction, it's interesting, right? The reaction to that, a lot of people immediately said, oh, this is directly related to last week's ruling. They're afraid of antitrust scrutiny. I don't know that Google moves that fast, that something that happens on Thursday can then, make affect such a change the week after. But then again, Google, of course, has contingency plans. So I'm sure they were planning for a potential guilty verdict. And maybe this is related to that in some way. I mean, I can't really say how things were shaking out in the privacy sandbox team and in their boardrooms. But what you say is absolutely correct. Like I think a lot of people are quite furious. The reaction on the day that news broke about the opt out mechanism at IAB, you would think everyone would be like running around going, oh, this is crazy. But I think didn't really sink in right away. But if you checked LinkedIn later and started looking at what people were saying on Twitter, like they were pretty pissed, even though third party cookies are not like the future or anything. But what a bunch of wasted motion, all these machinations. And we're kind of back where we were in 2019, although it's not a bad thing that people were investing in new addressability solutions. That is not a bad thing, but I think people felt a little jerked around.
You caught me. I had a brain warp. I'm I had a brain
This
warp.
is too much Google news, Lynn. It's too much Google news.
That's exactly what happened. I was asking you a question about one thing and veered into the other thing. And, that's just what happens when there's all these headlights in your way. Uh, Google is, of course, going to appeal. They're feeling like they've only half lost the case, right? And that their tools are still the most effective. You touched on this a little bit. But, like, are folks really buying that Google's tools are the most effective? Is that your sense here?
I mean, I don't know. I don't have the opportunity to talk to as many small publishers and like small business owners as I do a lot of larger publishers, right? That reach out to us with their new products. Like I talked to Dotdash and we talked to, the Washington Post and they've made ad tech investments, but smaller publishers and like mom and pop shops that spend a lot of money, well, relatively, through Google tools to promote their sites and to drive traffic and to promote their products, they're a completely different animal. And I mean, Google's argument isn't just that we're the best, but we're easy to use. And so there is an argument to be made. Of course, Google makes this argument vociferously that untying these things, although they wouldn't say that they were tied because that's a very specific antitrust term, but breaking all of this up is going to create a fragmented market. It's going to create more complexity for small businesses. So, I mean, to go back to your original question, I think a lot of more sophisticated publishers felt very locked in. I don't know about smaller publishers and if they even have like time to think about all of this craziness and smaller advertisers too. So I that was a hopefully not a non-answer.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. One thing I heard early on was that smaller publishers were feeling like it would cost them much more to make a change, to use something else.
Well,
Like,
so yeah, I want to cite Anthony Vargas's story that he published earlier this week. I think it was on Monday, about the pros and cons of a Google breakup. And he talked to some people who made the point that publishers are now going to have to pay separately for an ad server because an ad server was just like bundled in to the technology costs. So that's going to be an additional cost. There are going to be other additional costs and just a different way of monetizing if there were to be a breakup. But I do think it's important to note, I mean, you mentioned the appeal. There's going to be an appeal. We don't even have a date yet for the remedies phase to begin. Like there's going to be a hearing and then the judge hears both sides. It's like another mini trial basically about the remedies. Then she'll make a decision about which remedies are necessary, and then Google will appeal. And an appeal process takes for freaking ever. So nothing has to change until the appeals process is resolved. And if either side in an appellate kind of situation isn't happy with a ruling, and to even get to the ruling is going to take a year or two, then they can keep kicking it up all the way up to the Supreme Court even, right? I mean, who knows? The earth might crash into the sun before before we have any like real change. Not that this isn't a real vindication for a lot of people that were accused of wearing tinfoil hats for years.
I thought we were all wearing tinfoil hats,
Yeah.
but I'll
Only on a
leave that
bad
one.
hair day. Yeah.
I'll leave that one alone. I spoke to a small group of publishers this week, and their sense was that nothing in this industry will change until buyers and their dollars start demanding something different. Is that something you can agree with? That you,
I
what do you
mean,
think?
sure, buyers do have a lot of power. So you could say the same for really anything, right? I mean, why would buyers help monetize made for advertising content? Why wouldn't they be more careful about brand safety, all of that, unless they're called out by a screenshot and then they freak out? The way dollars flow, like that does kind of track with where change comes, because if you control the purse strings, you can push for change. I mean, look at Mark Pritchard from P&G making his big pronouncements about programmatic years ago. Like that was covered, constantly and referred to a million times, and people took it very seriously because that's the largest advertiser in the world making a statement about programmatic. And so yeah, buyers have a lot of power, but I don't know, I don't think publishers should embrace this like narrative that's out there, which is unflattering, that like we're sort of I don't know, powerless in some way, that we can't push for change. Like, I don't really like that. So I don't want to kick the ball over to somebody else and be like, well, you have to do it. Like, save us. Like, it's kind of like learned victimhood. I'm not into it.
It reminds me of that social media meme. I'm sure you've seen it. Ask somebody else to do it, right? And that's what it almost feels like publishers are saying
Well, yeah,
because
and publishers are bleeding, right? So, I mean, the imperative is on them. Like, take yourself to a hospital.
to a hospital, and the thing is, they would not even show up for W3C meetings, which is a whole other story, but we won't get into that part. Let's get back into this ruling, the remedies, what's the vibe in the marketplace. I want to zoom out a little bit and have you think about, because I think you have thought about this, what does this case mean for the other tech behemoths like Amazon, Meta, even Apple? Is the heat spreading?
I mean, definitely. I mean, it raises the regulatory risk for big companies overall, like with integrated systems, but it's also just a signal to in general, to big tech companies. There's a broader trend toward more antitrust scrutiny of big tech in their respective markets. And I think it's important to point out that there are already ongoing and upcoming cases against Meta and Amazon and Apple. And as we speak right now, within walking distance of where I'm sitting on the floor, Meta is defending itself in court against allegations from the FTC that its acquisitions of Instagram and WhatsApp were illegal. And there's an FTC suit alleging that Amazon suppresses price competition. That trial is scheduled for October of next year in Seattle. The DOJ filed a suit against Apple last year. Those allegations have to do with operating a smartphone monopoly because of restrictions on interoperability. It's hard to switch away from the iPhone. That case will be in New Jersey, but it's still pending. In Plano, Texas, later this year in August. This isn't federal. It's the Texas AG going to start their ad tech case against Google. It was very interesting because when I was in Virginia for that first week of the trial that we're now discussing, I saw a few people who work in the AG's office in Texas there, and I was introduced to them, and they were like avidly listening to the DOJ's argument and like trying to see where the wind was blowing because they're bringing a very similar case. So, I mean, the heat's already on. The heat is on.
The heat is already on. It's interesting about the Meta thing because it's like, why wasn't that a problem when they were initially acquiring them? Like, why weren't they questioned then?
I think there were maybe some questions. I mean, you could ask the same about DoubleClick, right? I mean, there were questions asked that went through anyway. So,
Yeah, and I guess that, and this is something we don't want to get into. It like depends on who's in the seat at the time, I guess, as well,
yeah.
right? Like politically speaking.
However,
Um,
I will say it is interesting that this case against Meta that the FTC is litigating right now over WhatsApp and Instagram, that was brought during the first Trump administration, and it's only coming to trial now. So it actually was not initiated during Biden's presidency.
okay. So now, yes, so that makes sense. Okay. So it's kind of like a round robin or something like that. What are some other things that, take you back to the courtroom again? If I know it was so long ago, but as you sat through, all of the courtroom drama, read all these filings, what were some of the most unexpected or jaw-dropping revelations that stuck out for you? Or
Well,
maybe things that you did not report on. How about that?
oh,
Yeah.
I tried my best to report on the whole shebang. Those stories got pretty long, but I will say this is just a little meta lowercase m. It was pretty wild to see so many ad exchanger stories mentioned during testimony. They were brought up as evidence multiple times, which was just wild. I will say there was nothing like massively surprising about this case, right? I mean, it's what I don't know if I can use the word allege because it's like that's a legal term, but I mean that's what publishers were alleging for years, right? And then it was just like surreal to see all of this stuff about header bidding and first, look and first price and second price auctions being discussed as if we were, in an episode of Law and Order. Although, as a sidebar, being in a real courtroom, it was my first time, is not like being in an episode of Law and Order. It was super slow. I mean, the questions you have to ask to get to the question you want to ask, it's amazing. Like as a lawyer, cross-examining or just examining somebody, you can't just ask them a question. You have to build toward your question and like build a foundation. And so you basically have to ask a Google executive, do you know what header bidding is? It's, okay, yes. I mean, they know what header bidding is. But I think specifically the stuff about the introduction of unified pricing rules, that was some of the most compelling testimony to me because the DOJ played a recording of a meeting from 2019 as evidence during the trial where Google was trying to explain the benefits of a bunch of new changes to its auction, including UPR, which is basically it's like a way to simplify how ads are priced and managed within Google's ad stack. But then they also eliminate a publisher's ability to set variable floor prices in DFP. And publishers were super mad about this at the time because they want to set their own floor prices. They don't want a system to circumvent them automatically. And so this meeting was recorded. It was fascinating to listen to. It was played in open court because you got to hear directly from publishers. You hear their voices. It was like being a fly on the wall, and it just demonstrated the level of frustration that they feel against Google.
And at the end of the day, that is what this is all about. It's very frustrating dealing with such a giant. And I know many people don't believe that anything is going to happen at the end of the day. So, what do you say? is next? You said it'll be months. Is this just a wait and see for the industry? Is there anything anyone should be doing now to prep?
I mean, I, I do want to say I don't think we can underestimate how much publishers feel seen here. It's vindication. It's proof that they're not all crazy. Their concerns and their complaints over the years were recognized by a federal court and upheld. So that's a big deal. The verdict is like emotional for a lot of publishers, but of course we're in wait and see mode because the remedies aren't set yet. We're going to get an appeal. And when the remedies are in place and the appeal is over, assuming the court doesn't side with Google, which I don't think will happen, but that could happen, breaking up Google's tech stack would be a complicated process. It could have unintended consequences for publishers. So having a verdict might feel final, but we're kind of still close to the beginning here. And I don't know that there's any changes that you should make really, because Google doesn't have to make any changes. Like nothing really has to change technically, even though it feels good to be validated.
So it's a feel good moment for publishers. Publishers
Yeah.
should be rejoicing in the streets right now, on the interwebs, whatever,
I,
wherever. All right, one last question. I think this is a fun one for you because I think you are the queen of headlines. What is one headline about this whole thing that you would like to use, but that you didn't use?
I mean, I could still use this one. It would be publishers take off your tinfoil hats. You were right, and a federal judge agrees! Exclamation mark.
I love that one, Allison. I love that one.
By
And
the
I think,
way, well, I just want
what?
to say,
Go ahead.
knocking the podcast mic all over, just for fun, I asked Perplexity to come up with a cheeky headline, and it kind of delivered, but it would be borderline not safe for work. So the Perplexity headline was Brinkema to Google, stop playing with yourself in the ad stack. Like, okay, I probably won't use that one, but
That is hilarious.
yeah, not bad.
That's not bad at all. Perplexity is, everyone talks about Chat GPT all the time, but Perplexity is actually my number one. It's because it actually does research. It has all those deep research tools and built in. ChatGPT does now too, for if you're on a pro plan. But anyway, I digress. Time to wrap up things here because there are a whole other things we could talk about here beyond Google today. I just want to add some things here. We have some events coming up. I actually want to show this one first. Programmatic IO Innovate. Allison, that's your event. What can you tell folks about this event?
Oh, you should come to it. Like, come to this event. It's a really good one. I mean, it's going to be very practical. So we'll talk about what's going on in the industry, but through the lens of what you can actually like do to do your jobs better. So it won't just be, like high level stuff. It'll be really practical. So practical and programmatic. It's alliterative. Come, buy your
It's,
tickets.
it's practical and programmatic, and get your pass
There you go.
with the
Pronto,
code.
pronto, pronto.
Pronto, pronto. Lots of alliteration. We love it. And then there's also AdMonsters Sell Site Summit coming up. All of these, if you grab these QR codes right here, you can get these discounts. August 17th through 19th in Nashville. We are going to have a concentration on out of the browser. What does that mean? You should attend to find out.
Very mysterious.
It's very mysterious. No, it's just about, things are changing in the open web, right? Like dramatically with all these algorithms changing and AI and just everything. So it's like for pubs to start thinking beyond the browser of how they reach their audiences, right? Like e-newsletters and everything else. I don't want to give everything away. So yeah, lots of fun stuff, just like programmatic IO, practical, hands-on workshops, best practices. So uh about to sign off. Allison, any parting words?
I don't know. Let me think. What would be something pithy for me to say? I would just say this is a major milestone. and we're going to see more antitrust scrutiny. And I'm going to go to the remedies phase of this thing. I mean, I haven't asked anyone yet if I can, but I'm saying it publicly. So now you got to give me the budget to go. I'll cover it. So looking forward to the next steps.
So stay locked into AdExchanger as Allison and the rest of the team over at AdExchanger continues to move you through the next steps of the DOJ versus Google. All right.